everybody. My name is Kevin McAdam. I'm the Head of Product Strategy for Omnio, and also I am the Project Lead for EPA International Trade. One of the important parts of the work that International Trade has been doing has been creating an international toolkit for the EPA members. And the basis of this is all about really providing a knowledge base for our members to understand how they could possibly enter into new markets. We've initially chosen 6 countries to do this piece of work on, which includes us producing a country profile and a signpost document. But really to help sort of bring this to life, we've been inviting guests, industry experts from within the region to really bring to life, what's happening in that particular country. So today I'm very delighted to have Aileen from Mastercard. I'll get Aileen to introduce herself in a moment, who is based in Thailand, to really sort of discuss a bit more with me how the payment landscape is changing in Thailand. So Aileen, over to yourself, first of all, to introduce, and then I'll start asking you some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So my name is Aileen. I am the country manager for Mastercard in Thailand and also in Myanmar. And I'm currently here in Bangkok, enjoying the land of smiles and looking forward to answering some questions, Kevin, today.
Lovely. Well, great to have you, and really appreciate you taking the time. And I'm sure the weather's much hotter and nicer in Bangkok than it is here.
I am very blessed to be spending my COVID sort of lockdown here. Thailand is beautiful, even in the worst of times.
Okay, great. Well, look, thank you again. So look, let's talk payments. Obviously, payment landscape is changing rapidly at the moment. This is from a global perspective, and obviously COVID has also had a sort of rapid impact. Maybe if you could first of all just explain, what the developments are within Thailand in terms of the payment landscape.
So, I mean, Kevin, as you rightfully put it, I think the pandemic's had a really big impact on the way we pay. We feel it everywhere globally. In fact, I think digital payments worldwide has seen exponential growth since last year because of the pandemic. 3 out of 4 transactions that we as Mastercard have in stores today in the Asia Pacific region are actually what we call touchless payments. So there's been a huge shift in terms of consumer behavior. And the most interesting thing is that, 80% of those transactions are actually what we call small ticket size. So they're less than US $25. This is typically a range that would normally be dominated by cash. So we're seeing this huge shift, not just to touchless payments, but a shift, I think, from cash to digital, which has, I think, been driving that exponential growth that we were talking about. I think even before the pandemic, Thailand's digital habits and cashless preferences were already on the rise. It has a very vibrant ecosystem of payment technologies in the market today. In Q1 of 2021 this year, about 1 billion more contactless transactions were actually made as compared to the same period last year. And actually in Thailand, usage grew 4 times year on year. So that, again, showing how vibrant the market is in terms of its adoption of digital payments. We did a survey recently on Thai consumers, and almost 80% said that they were going to use cash less frequently in the coming year. And this was primarily driven by concerns around hygiene and security, something that is consistent with what we've seen in other markets as well during the pandemic period. But interestingly, in Thailand, over 60% of consumers used QR codes for payments much more frequently than they had in the past. And this is higher than the global average that we've seen both in the world as well as in the Asia Pacific region. So Thailand, I think, really coming out tops in terms of digital payment adoption, touchless payments, but interestingly on QR payments as well, which is something quite unique to the country. We see this a lot when people are using touch-free payments to buy food and groceries. So those are kind of the top sort of use cases where we see the emergence of these touch-free payments. And not just with the consumers, but obviously even within the merchants, the businesses that operate in Thailand, awareness of non-cash payment methods, including contactless, is at an all-time high. Our recent surveys with the merchant community in Thailand show that almost 70% of merchants are aware of touchless payments. Almost 30% of them readily accept some form of touchless payment, such as contactless cards. And so this is growing every month. And Thai merchants, I think, are also sensing that this is something that they have to offer to consumers because of consumer choice. Consumers are asking for it at the point of sale. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more, I think, in terms of what we've seen in our own omni-channel survey and some of the opportunities for businesses that want to enter Thailand. But in a nutshell, Thailand, no different from the rest of the world in terms of digital payments during the pandemic, just much faster in terms of adoption and a much more focused use around QR.
No, great. That's fantastic, and thank you. Some of the stats are quite amazing, aren't they? Really, it's you know, even the best marketing couldn't have helped to sort of drive that contactless, touchless type transaction development. So that's brilliant. So looking forward, then, I mean, obviously you've seen that change over the last 2 or 3 years. Going forward, what do you see, you know, as the real development areas within Thailand, you know, from the payment landscape point of view?
Several. I'll just talk about a few. And the reason why I say there are several things I think to watch out for is Thailand, I think, has a very progressive central bank. Government entities are generally very cooperative when it comes to digital acceleration. Interestingly, very vibrant private sector that seems to play very well with fintechs. So you see a lot of what I call co-opetition between banks and fintechs or tech fins, which results in a lot of, I think, innovation that we've seen in the market. And a little bit on that sort of accelerated adoption that I spoke about earlier as well. So some of the key things which I think are really important to note is that number one, new payment habits are going to continue to grow. In fact, when we did the survey on the Thai consumers, 91% of them said that they used at least one new type of payment in the last 12 months. And that same group also said that they were going to try new payment methods in the future. And they were actually most comfortable with the use of cryptocurrency compared to other countries in the Asia Pacific region. Our survey showed that almost 50% were comfortable buying or using cryptocurrency. This is quite a startling fact. In fact, almost 20% of them had used cryptocurrency in some way, shape, or form in the past 12 months. And this, I think, if you've looked at what has been happening with the Bank of Thailand and some of the developments that have been happening in the local Thai market, there has been a lot of focus on digital currencies and digital assets. The Bank of Thailand, I think, quite openly talks about its own plans to pilot a national central bank digital currency for the purposes of facilitating trade payments. There are some active talks with pilots and use cases that they want to try. And I think this, again, will be an emerging area of growth that we need to look out for in Thailand. So I think that's one of the key ones. And I think the work there, I think for a company like Mastercard, as well as anybody who is in the industry, is really to focus on how we ensure that the benefits of safe, seamless payments, which are still, you know, compliant to the regulation in the market, still offer consumer choice and consumer protection, continue to grow in Thailand. So as we look at emerging payments like cryptocurrency, there is a lot of work that the industry can do to ensure that consumers continue to have the choice, but still have the ability to transact safely and in a manner which I think the regulation and compliance requirements are met. So that's one big piece of work that we are focused on. The second one, I think, is around the SME area. So Thailand, SMEs are the backbone of Thailand, right? I think they comprise of over 99.5% of all registered businesses in the country. This huge proliferation of SMEs also means that we see a huge growth in what we call social commerce. So essentially, a lot of small businesses operating online businesses on social media, whether it's Facebook or sort of the local messaging chat groups like Line, for example. And that creates a slightly different ecosystem in terms of how businesses buy and sell, how businesses receive payments from consumers when they sell things online. So a lot of work, I think, and a lot of growth is going to be around real-time payments, how consumers are able to pay using real-time payments from their bank accounts or from their wallets directly to SMEs that are operating small businesses on Facebook or on their Line chat, for example. So that's a huge area of growth and will continue to grow even faster as, even as the pandemic winds down, because consumers have now gotten used to this form of digital commerce and are starting to look to the digital economy as the default place for them to get goods and services. So I think really areas for growth in Thailand are around emerging payments, such as cryptocurrency, but also I think continuing to support small businesses as they join the digital economy in the country.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Thank you. It's really interesting as well. Quite a nice balance, isn't it, between the really sort of supporting, like you said, small, medium type businesses, but at the same time, really driving forward the crypto agenda. That's really good.
It's interesting. And sorry, Kevin, if I might just add on as well a little bit, SMEs are not just the recipients of payments, but SMEs themselves make payments. And interestingly, I think as they join the digital economy, they themselves participate as payers in the digital economy, buying more and more of their goods and services without cash, but more through, digital forms of payments, which we expect over time could include digital assets or digital currencies as well. So I think this is quite interesting because we're starting to see the ecosystem really grow organically with new participants joining it. And that's really sort of making a much more exciting space for Thailand.
No, excellent. Thank you. So my final question to you really is obviously, from a market entry point of view, I mean, obviously I can, even from what you've told me this morning and having read about this, quite obviously lots of exciting things happening in Thailand. But obviously for our members, what would you see as sort of possible challenges or barriers? But interesting also in terms of the crypto, do you see things in terms of from a regulatory point of view? So I suppose my question really is, what would you advise would be possibly the challenges and barriers to entry?
I would say, at least from what we can see on the retail business, new players entering the market need to be prepared to operate on what we call an omni-channel basis. It's starting to become quite obvious from the research we've done, and I think from speaking to industry players, that consumer preferences are going to be skewed by whether or not the brands or the places that they do business with or they shop with are able to offer them a choice of being able to transact digitally or in the analog fashion. Actually, the numbers are overwhelming. So, over 85% of consumers now say they prefer to shop at stores that have both an in-person and an online presence.
Right.
So it's now become a hygiene to have an online store, not just to have a brick and mortar presence. There is a strong preference for merchants to offer electronic payments. 60% of consumers surveyed said they would actually avoid merchants that only accepted cash. So that's quite interesting. And, over 80% would shop at merchants that offered more than one type of digital payment. So not just traditionally cards, but, payments from wallets, and in the future, obviously, potentially, some form of digital currency that's endorsed by the central bank. So we are starting to see that brands have to make the investment. They have to double down and they have to start offering an omni-channel experience. And that I think is both, challenging, but at the same time, extremely exciting about operating in Thailand.
Okay, excellent. And maybe just a quick question from me, because it's such a global phenomenon at the moment. It's about the whole buy now, pay later. And I was just going to ask you, how is that emerging in Thailand?
I think it's very interesting that you brought that up, Kevin. Flexible financing, as we call it, the ability to sort of choose when you pay for what you've bought is not an uncommon it's not an uncommon area for Thailand. Thailand is actually fairly mature when it comes to this. I think the whole buy now, pay later trend, as the industry sees it, is primarily focused on a new segment of consumers as well as merchants that the traditional financial institutions had not previously considered was part of, you know, their offering to the market. And what I mean by this is we've seen the most interest around young people, millennials, who themselves are probably have, you know, no sort of debt history. They're actually, you know, good credit rating sort of consumers, right? So that's number one. And they are looking to use buy now, pay later to purchase things that are what we would typically consider to be everyday purchases. So slightly lower ticket size, higher frequency purchases. And so buy now, pay later, I think, has sort of opened up the thinking that this is not just about buying a refrigerator or an oven or a laptop. This is about buying, you know, fast fashion, cosmetics, you know, stuff from the Boots pharmacy, that sort of an area. And that is quite interesting to the industry players in terms of obviously, you know, a new area of growth and a new way to acquire a new customer base. Right. So yes, there is interest. And I think that's really where sort of the focus has been in terms of what buy now, pay later means to the Thai industry.
That's great. Well, look, Aileen, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much. Very, very insightful. I feel it's going to be incredibly invaluable to to the EPA membership and the wider audience. And I think it will be a great complement to what you've said today, to what we've put into the country profile and the signpost document. So thank you again. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you.